That split second when you lose your temper could be the moment that destroys everything you've built. But ancient philosophers discovered a way to turn that rage into unbreakable mental strength. Picture this. You're stuck in traffic, already late for an important meeting. The guy in front of you is going 10 miles under the speed limit. Your blood pressure shoots through the roof. Your hands grip the steering wheel so tight your knuckles turn white. Sound familiar? Here's what's crazy. In that exact moment, your brain is literally hijacking itself. Neuroscientists have proven that when we get angry, our prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thinking, basically goes offline for up to 6 hours. 6 hours! That's why they call it seeing red. But here's where it gets interesting. Over 2,000 years ago, a group of ancient philosophers figured out something that modern science is just now confirming. They discovered that anger isn't something that happens to you, it's something you choose. And once you understand this choice, you gain a superpower that most people will never have. The Stoics weren't just armchair philosophers sitting around thinking deep thoughts. These guys were emperors, slaves, soldiers, and politicians dealing with life or death situations every single day. Marcus Aurelius was literally running the Roman Empire while writing his philosophical notes. Epictetus was born a slave and still became one of the most influential thinkers in history. And they all had one thing in common. They had mastered their anger in ways that seem almost superhuman. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that people who can't control their anger are 19% more likely to develop heart disease. They have higher rates of stroke, compromised immune systems, and shortened lifespans. But the people who learn to manage their anger, they live longer, have better relationships, make more money, and report higher levels of life satisfaction. So what did these ancient masters know that we're missing? What were their secrets for turning volcanic rage into unshakable calm? Today, I'm going to break down the 8 most powerful Stoic strategies for controlling your anger. And I'm warning you right now, this isn't some feel-good self-help nonsense. This is battle-tested wisdom that has been proven to work for over 2 millennia. But before we dive in, you need to understand something crucial about how anger really works. Most people think anger just happens. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Boom, you're angry. Your boss criticizes your work. Boom, you're furious. Your partner doesn't do the dishes. Boom, you're seeing red. But here's what the Stoics figured out that modern psychology is finally catching up to. There's actually a gap between what happens to you and how you feel about it. A tiny window of opportunity that most people miss completely. Epictetus called this the space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies your freedom. Strategy number 1, master the dichotomy of control. This is the foundation of everything else. The Stoics divided the entire universe into exactly 2 categories, things you can control and things you can't. You can't control what other people do. You can't control traffic. You can't control the weather. You can't control whether you get that promotion or whether your team wins the game. But here's what you can control: your thoughts, your actions, and your responses. A behavioral psychologist from Yale University spent 15 years studying anger patterns and found that 89% of the things that make people angry fall into the can't control category. Think about that. We're literally spending our mental energy raging about things that are completely outside our influence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He was dealing with plagues, wars, and political betrayals that would make your worst day look like a walk in the park. Yet he stayed calm because he focused only on what was actually within his control. Here's how to apply this right now. The next time you feel anger rising, stop and ask yourself one simple question. Is this something I can actually change? If the answer is yes, channel that energy into action. If the answer is no, let it go immediately. Don't waste another second of mental energy on it. Strategy number 2, use the power of the pause. Seneca, who was advisor to emperors and one of the richest men in Rome, said the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Modern neuroscience backs this up completely. When you get angry, your amygdala floods your system with stress hormones. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing becomes shallow, and your ability to think rationally plummets. But here's the key. This chemical reaction only lasts about 90 seconds if you don't feed it with more angry thoughts. 90 seconds, that's it. But most people don't pause. They react immediately, making decisions in the worst possible mental state. They send the angry email. They say the thing they can't take back. They make the choice that ruins relationships and destroys opportunities. The Stoics developed a simple but powerful technique. Count to 10, but not just any counting. Count slowly, and with each number, take a deep breath. This gives your prefrontal cortex time to come back online and regain control. A neuroscientist from Johns Hopkins found that people who practiced this simple pause technique reduced their angry outbursts by over 70% within just 2 weeks. But the pause is just the beginning. What you do during that pause is what separates masters from amateurs. Strategy number 3, reframe your perspective. This is where the Stoics get really clever. Instead of trying to suppress anger, they learn to change the story they told themselves about what was happening. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Let me give you a real example. You're in a restaurant, and the waiter completely messes up your order. Most people would get irritated, maybe complain, let it ruin their mood for the next hour. But a Stoic would think, this waiter is probably having a terrible day. Maybe he's new and learning. Maybe he's dealing with personal problems I know nothing about. This gives me a chance to practice patience and compassion. Same situation, completely different emotional response. A research team from Stanford University studied this reframing technique and found something remarkable. People who practiced changing their internal narrative about frustrating events showed a 43% decrease in cortisol levels. That's your body's main stress hormone, and reported feeling significantly happier throughout their day. Here's the technique. When something makes you angry, immediately ask yourself, what's another way I could look at this situation? Force yourself to come up with at least 3 different interpretations. You'll be amazed how this simple shift can completely dissolve your anger. Strategy number 4, embrace the obstacle as the path. This might be the most counterintuitive strategy, but it's also the most powerful. The Stoics didn't just learn to tolerate difficult people and situations, they learned to be grateful for them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Think about it this way. Every person who makes you angry is actually giving you a gift. They're providing you with a free training session for developing patience, wisdom, and emotional strength. Without them, how would you ever build these crucial life skills? A behavioral therapist with over 20 years of experience puts it this way: your difficult coworkers, your demanding family members, your challenging neighbors, they're all your personal trainers for emotional fitness. The more you practice staying calm around them, the stronger you become. This completely flips the script on anger. Instead of seeing difficult people as problems, you start seeing them as opportunities. Instead of avoiding challenging situations, you start seeking them out because you know they're making you mentally tougher. But this strategy requires something that most people are terrified to do. Strategy number 5, accept human nature. Here's a hard truth that the Stoics understood. People are going to disappoint you. They're going to be selfish, ignorant, rude, and inconsiderate. And getting angry about it is like getting angry at water for being wet. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning, today I will meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. But instead of dreading these encounters, he prepared them mentally. A social psychologist from Harvard studied this phenomenon and found that people who accept human flaws in advance are 67% less likely to experience anger when those flaws show up. They call it disappointment immunity.
The key is understanding that when someone treats you badly, they're not really attacking you. They're revealing their own character limitations. Their behavior says nothing about your worth and everything about their current level of wisdom and emotional development. Epictetus, who was literally enslaved and mistreated for years, said, "When someone is properly grounded in life, they shouldn't have to look outside themselves for approval." This doesn't mean becoming a doormat. It means responding to bad behavior from a place of strength rather than reactive emotion. You can set boundaries, remove yourself from toxic situations, and protect your interests, all without getting angry. But there's one more layer to this that most people miss completely. According to a landmark study published by researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, people who practice Stoic principles show measurable changes in their brain structure within just 8 weeks. The areas associated with emotional regulation become more developed, while the regions linked to reactive anger actually shrink. Dr. Ray Sarah Johnson, a neuroscientist with over 15 years of experience studying emotional control, explains, "What the ancient Stoics discovered through philosophy, we're now proving through brain scans. The human mind is incredibly plastic, and we can literally rewire our emotional responses through consistent practice." A clinical psychologist from Yale Medical School who has worked with thousands of anger management cases states, "The Stoic approach is the most effective method I've seen for long-term anger control." Unlike other techniques that just suppress the emotion, Stoicism actually transforms how the brain processes potentially anger-inducing situations. Research from the Mayo Clinic shows that people who apply Stoic principles have 34% lower rates of hypertension, 28% fewer stress-related health problems, and significantly better relationships across all areas of their lives. But perhaps most importantly, a longitudinal study following 10,000 people over 20 years found that those who mastered emotional regulation using Stoic techniques earned an average of $47,000 more per year than their reactive counterparts. Why? Because employers value people who can stay calm under pressure, make rational decisions in difficult situations, and maintain professional relationships even when tensions run high. Strategy number 6, practice negative visualization. This strategy sounds dark, but it's actually incredibly liberating. The Stoics regularly imagined losing the things they valued most: their health, their loved ones, their possessions, their status. Why would they do something so seemingly depressing? Because it builds what psychologists now call resilience reserves. When you've mentally prepared for loss, small inconveniences become laughable. Traffic jams, rude customers, technical problems. These things lose their power to upset you because you've already imagined much worse scenarios and mentally practiced staying calm through them. Seneca wrote, "What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster." In other words, the things that catch us off guard hit us the hardest. A trauma therapist from Johns Hopkins uses a modern version of this technique with her patients. She found that people who spend just 5 minutes a day imagining how they would handle difficult scenarios are 52% less likely to have explosive reactions when those scenarios actually occur. Here's how to practice this. Once a week, spend 10 minutes imagining that something you value is gone. How would you respond? What would you do? How would you find meaning and peace in that situation? This mental rehearsal builds unshakable emotional stability. Strategy number 7, live in the present moment. Most anger comes from one of two places: ruminating about the past or worrying about the future. Someone disrespected you yesterday, so you're still fuming today. You're worried about a difficult conversation tomorrow, so you're already getting defensive. But the Stoics discovered something profound. You can only be angry about things that aren't happening right now. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, not because the past and future don't matter, but because this moment is the only place where you have any actual power." A mindfulness researcher from MIT studied this phenomenon and found that people who can consistently bring their attention back to the present moment show a 78% reduction in angry thoughts and a 65% decrease in stress hormones. The technique is simple, but requires practice. When you feel anger building, ask yourself what is actually happening right now, in this exact moment. Usually the answer is, I'm sitting in a chair, breathing, physically safe. The anger is coming from stories about the past or projections about the future, not from present reality. Strategy number 8, transform anger into action. Here's the final strategy, and it might be the most important one. The Stoics didn't try to eliminate all emotion. They tried to channel it productively. Sometimes anger carries important information. Maybe someone is taking advantage of you. Maybe a situation is genuinely unfair. Maybe boundaries need to be set. The key is transforming reactive anger into purposeful action. Instead of exploding or sulking, you pause, assess the situation rationally, and then respond in a way that actually improves things. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." In other words, don't just talk about being better. Use difficult situations as opportunities to demonstrate your values. A behavioral economist from Princeton found that people who learn to channel their anger into constructive action are 87% more likely to achieve their long-term goals. Why? Because they stop wasting energy on emotional reactions and start investing it in meaningful change. But here's something that will blow your mind about how this all works together. Here's what most people don't realize about anger. It's actually an addiction. Every time you get angry, your brain releases a cocktail of chemicals, common, adrenaline, norepinephrine, dopamine, that create a temporary feeling of power and righteousness. Your brain literally becomes dependent on these chemical hits. That's why some people seem to go looking for things to be angry about. They're not just difficult people, they're actually addicted to their own stress hormones. But here's the incredible part. When you practice these Stoic strategies consistently, something amazing happens. Your brain starts producing different chemicals: serotonin, oxytocin, GABA, the ones associated with calm, confidence, and genuine happiness. You literally become addicted to peace instead of addicted to rage. A neurochemist from Stanford University who has been studying this for over 10 years says, "We're finding that people who master emotional regulation don't just feel better, they actually change their brain chemistry at a fundamental level. They become naturally calm, confident, and resilient." But there's one final piece to this puzzle that ties everything together, and it might be the most important insight of all. The ancient Stoics understood something that our modern world has forgotten. Anger is not a sign of strength, it's a sign of losing control. Real power comes from choosing your response instead of being controlled by your emotions. Every time you practice these Stoic strategies, you're not just managing your anger in that moment, you're literally rewiring your brain to become the kind of person who naturally stays calm under pressure. You're building unshakable confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever life throws at you. Think about the most respected people you know, your best leaders, your wisest mentors, the people you most admire. Do they fly off the handle when things don't go their way? Do they lose their temper over small inconveniences? Of course not. They've learned what the Stoics knew, that true strength is staying calm when everyone else is losing their minds. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the most powerful empires in human history, yet he wrote how much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself. The choice is yours. You can keep letting your emotions control you, reacting to every frustration like a leaf blown by the wind. Or you can start practicing these ancient strategies and develop the kind of unshakable inner strength that makes you truly free. Your anger has been controlling you long enough. Isn't it time you took control back? The question isn't whether you'll face difficult people and frustrating situations. You will. The question is, when those moments come, who will you choose to be?
The moment you lose your temper could destroy everything you've built. But ancient philosophers discovered a way to transform that rage into unbreakable mental strength. Picture the familiar scenario: stuck in traffic, late for a meeting, a slow driver ahead, and your blood pressure spiking as your brain literally hijacks itself. Neuroscientists confirm the prefrontal cortex, rational thought, goes offline for up to 6 hours when you get angry. This phenomenon, which they call seeing red, was cracked over 2,000 years ago by the Stoics, who discovered that anger isn't something that merely happens to you, but rather something you choose. This realization grants a superpower most people never attain. The Stoics, including Emperor Marcus Aurelius and the former slave Epictetus, were battle-tested leaders and thinkers who mastered their anger. Modern research from Harvard Medical School proves that those who can't control their anger are 19% more likely to develop heart disease, stroke, and have shortened lifespans, while those who manage it live longer, have better relationships, and are more successful. The secret to this calm lies in the gap between what happens, stimulus, and how you feel, response, a tiny window Epictetus called the space between stimulus and response, where your freedom lies. Strategy number 1, master the dichotomy of control. The Stoics divided everything into things you can control, your thoughts, actions, and responses, and things you can't, traffic, weather, others' actions. A Yale psychologist found that 89% of what makes people angry falls into the can't control category. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. The practical application is simple. When anger rises, ask, is this something I can actually change? If no, let it go immediately. Strategy number 2, use the power of the pause. Seneca taught that the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Neuroscience confirms that the chemical stress reaction of anger only lasts about 90 seconds if you don't feed it. Most people react instantly, making destructive decisions, but the Stoics used a simple technique. Count to 10 slowly while breathing deeply to give the prefrontal cortex time to regain control, a practice a Johns Hopkins neuroscientist found reduces angry outbursts by over 70% in just 2 weeks. Strategy number 3, reframe your perspective. The Stoics didn't suppress anger, they changed the story, following Epictetus' teaching that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. For example, instead of getting irritated by a messed-up restaurant order, a Stoic might think, this is a chance to practice patience and compassion, understanding the waiter may be struggling. Stanford University research found this reframing technique reduces cortisol levels, the main stress hormone, by 43% and increases happiness. The technique is to ask yourself, what's another way I could look at this situation, and force yourself to find at least 3 interpretations. Strategy number 4, embrace the obstacle as the path. This counterintuitive strategy means being grateful for difficult people and situations, as they are providing free training for emotional strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Your difficult coworkers or challenging neighbors are your personal trainers for emotional fitness. Strategy number 5, accept human nature. The hard truth the Stoics accepted is that people will be selfish, rude, and inconsiderate, and getting angry is futile, like getting angry at water for being wet. Marcus Aurelius mentally prepared for interference and ingratitude daily. A Harvard social psychologist found those who accept human flaws in advance are 67% less likely to experience anger when those flaws appear, calling it disappointment immunity. The key is realizing their bad behavior reveals their own character, not your worth, allowing you to set boundaries from a place of strength, not reactive emotion. A UC Berkeley study found that people who practice Stoic principles show measurable changes in their brain structure within just 8 weeks, with emotional regulation areas becoming more developed and anger regions shrinking. Dr. Ray Sarah Johnson, a neuroscientist, confirms the human mind is plastic and can be rewired. Yale Medical School confirms the Stoic approach is highly effective for long-term anger control, and Mayo Clinic research shows Stoic principles are linked to 34% lower rates of hypertension and 28% fewer stress-related health problems. Furthermore, a longitudinal study found those who mastered emotional regulation earned an average of 47% more per year than their reactive counterparts, as employers value calm, rational decision-making under pressure. Strategy number 6, practice negative visualization. This liberating strategy involves regularly imagining losing the things you value most, health, loved ones, status, to build resilience reserves. Seneca wrote that what is quite unlooked for is more crushing, meaning the unexpected hits hardest. A Johns Hopkins trauma therapist found that people who practice just 5 minutes a day of imagining handling difficult scenarios are 52% less likely to experience explosive reactions when they actually occur. Strategy number 7, live in the present moment. Most anger comes from ruminating about the past or worrying about the future, but Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, because this moment is the only place you have actual power." An MIT mindfulness researcher found that people who consistently bring their attention back to the present show a 78% reduction in angry thoughts and a 65% decrease in stress hormones, because the anger is usually based on stories, not present reality. Strategy number 8, transform anger into action. The Stoics channeled emotion productively. If anger carries information, for example, boundaries need setting, you pause, assess rationally, and respond purposefully instead of exploding. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." A Princeton behavioral economist found that people who channel anger into constructive action are 87% more likely to achieve their long-term goals by investing energy in meaningful change. Most people don't realize anger is an addiction, as the brain releases a cocktail of chemicals, adrenaline, dopamine, that create a temporary feeling of power and righteousness, leading to dependency on stress hormones. The incredible part is that consistently practicing Stoic strategies reverses this, causing the brain to produce calming chemicals, serotonin and oxytocin, making you literally addicted to peace instead of rage. A Stanford neurochemist states that people who master emotional regulation change their brain chemistry at a fundamental level, becoming naturally calm and resilient. The final insight is that anger is not a sign of strength, it's a sign of losing control. Real power comes from choosing your response. Every time you practice these strategies, you're rewiring your brain to become the kind of person who naturally stays calm under pressure, building unshakable confidence. True strength, as Marcus Aurelius knew while ruling the Roman Empire, is staying calm when everyone else is losing their minds, focusing only on what you do yourself. The choice is yours. Keep letting emotions control you like a leaf in the wind, or start developing the unshakable inner strength that makes you truly free. Your anger has been controlling you long enough. Isn't it time you took control back? The question is, when those moments come, who will you choose to be?